At the Riverside Club in Austin, I stood behind one of the thick stone columns near the back wall. I wasn't on the guest list. Not really. Jenna had filled out my RSVP under spouse, like an afterthought, just a formality. The room was too bright. The chandeliers cast a pale, expensive light that made everything and everyone look a little hollow. You could see the cracks in people's smiles, the sweat behind their collarbones. I stayed where I was told, off to the side, next to the coats, one shoulder pressed against the cold marble. Like part of the architecture, something functional but unseen. Jenna had warned me in the car. "These are serious people," she'd said, applying her lipstick in the mirror, barely looking at me. "I need you to just stay behind me tonight. Please don't embarrass me." She'd said it softly but not kindly. I nodded, because that's what I'd learned to do. She disappeared into the crowd. Everyone in that room looked like they owned something. A house in the hills, a piece of a startup, someone else's time. Jenna fit right in, hair like glass, heels sharp enough to cut tile. She laughed in the right places, leaned in when people spoke, touched wrists and elbows like she'd been born into all of it. Me? I was the man who fixed wires behind the walls. I wasn't dressed wrong, but I felt wrong. I could spot another tradesman across a room by his posture alone. None here. Just white teeth and watches that ticked loud. Then I heard it. The sound of heels, not frantic, not rushed, just decisive. Eleanor Hill. You didn't have to see her face to know who it was. Every voice near the entrance fell half a note. Even the band's piano seemed to taper off when she entered. The kind of woman who didn't have to announce herself. The room did it for her. She scanned the crowd, then walked past the mayor, past the university president, past Jenna. Straight to me. She didn't smile. She didn't ask for my name. She took my hand, gently, turned it palm up and stared at the old burn scar running jagged across my knuckles. That scar had been with me since the day I misjudged a live panel at Keller Electric in '04. Should have walked away that day. I didn't. Eleanor traced it with her eyes like it was a roadmap. "I've been looking for you for 28 years. Somewhere behind us, a wine glass hit the floor. Jenna froze. I could feel the weight of her stare. Her breath caught halfway between rage and confusion. Eleanor didn't flinch. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt like I wasn't just passing through someone else's life. We met again 6 days later. It wasn't planned. Not by me. She called from a number I didn't recognize. Said she was passing through, heading south. Said she knew a diner, old, quiet, off the highway, still served eggs with the shells sometimes. We met there. Red booths. Sticky menus. Coffee that tasted like burnt promises. She remembered everything. That last swing at the high school championship. The field lights cutting through the fog. The curveball that shouldn't have connected. The smell of grass on my sleeves. She remembered the look on my face when I stepped onto home plate. Not joy, not pride. Just finality. Like I already knew it wouldn't last. I told her what came after. The scholarship offers. The scouts. The injury. Dad's stroke. Selling the house. Stepping off the field and onto a ladder with a coil of Romex over one shoulder. She listened without blinking. She remembered the weight of things. Then she leaned in, voice quieter now. "You still getting retirement statements?" I blinked. "What?" "Your union pension. The Roth. The personal one tied to the Hill Country job. You still getting those?" I shook my head slowly. "They went digital," I said, though it sounded weak as I said it. "Jenna handles the books now." Eleanor just nodded, stirred her coffee, said nothing for a moment. Then, "That's not how it works. Not unless you signed it over." And there it was, the itch in my spine, the faint taste of metal behind my teeth. Because I hadn't seen a statement in over 9 months. Not from the 401k. Not from the Hill job. Not from the IRA I opened the same year Sophie moved in and called me Mike instead of Dad. Jenna always said it was all online now. "You'll just confuse yourself," she'd say with a laugh. "I'll show you later." Later never came. I finished my coffee. Didn't touch the toast. Eleanor slid a piece of paper across the table. A list of numbers. The O box address. A date circled in red ink. You still have your key? She meant the post office box. The one I opened before Jenna and I moved into the house. Before the stepdad title. Before the silences grew heavy. I found the key that night in a box marked spare screws. Next morning, I drove to the post office before the sun came up. I waited outside with the retirees and the insomniacs. The air smelled like gasoline and dust. Inside, I unlocked box 177. Empty. No statements. No circulars. No nothing. Clean as a confession booth. That night, Jenna asked me why I was home early. Slow week. I lied. She nodded, didn't look up from her phone. Something in her jaw was too still. I knew that look. That look meant she was calculating. The next few days I started pulling threads. Quietly, I went through the office drawer she kept locked. The one labeled, Documents, Private. She thought I'd never check. Inside were folders. Neat, labeled, terrifying. Power of attorney papers. Account authorizations. Retirement benefit transfers. My signature on things I'd never seen. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I began writing things down. Dates. File names. Phrases she used when brushing off my questions. It's all taken care of, she'd say. You don't have to worry about that stuff. Stuff. As if my future was clutter. As if years of night shifts, busted shoulders, blown knees. All the things I carried so Sophie could have her cello lessons and organic lunchboxes were just stuff. That week, I started carrying a notebook. I didn't hide it. Let her see me scribbling. Watched her eyes tighten whenever I did. She stopped leaving bills out after that. Stopped printing anything at all. Started locking her laptop. The house got quiet in a new way, not peaceful, just careful. Like we were both waiting for a sound that hadn't come yet. I didn't sleep much. I'd wake up and sit in the garage. Stare at the shelves I built with my own hands. The insulation I installed. The wiring I buried behind drywall no one ever saw. It hit me that everything I ever gave, to this family, to this house, to this life, was invisible. Just like me. One night, Sophie came home late. She didn't look at me, didn't say hello, just brushed past me with a glance that said, "You're still here?" That was when I remembered something Eleanor had said, almost offhand. You always looked like a man who expected too little. That stayed with me, because she was right. I had learned to live in the background, to accept scraps of acknowledgement, to be the man who paid, who built, who carried, without ever being fully let in. I thought love meant enduring. I thought silence meant peace. But that night, in the dark garage, with the air too still and my hands aching from years of holding this house together, I realized I'd mistaken endurance for purpose. And that was the moment I decided I would stop being invisible. I would stop waiting. I would start looking. At my finances. At my mail. At my name, the one quietly erased behind forged lines. I went back to that mailbox every day for a week. Still empty. Until one afternoon, I got there before the carrier did. Waited in my truck. Watched him sort the mail behind the glass. Watched him skip my box. When I asked, he looked confused. Box 177? Mail gets rerouted now. Forwarded address on file. Been that way since May. Who authorized that? He shrugged. Power of attorney signed. Everything looked official. He showed me the form. My name was there, but the signature wasn't mine. Not even close. I drove straight from the post office to the credit union. Not the one Jenna and I opened our joint account with, the older one, the one still tied to my apprenticeship days. I sat in the lobby with my work boots still dusty, sweat running down my back, hands too tight on the arms of the chair. The clerk was young, nice enough, called me sir too many times. I just want to verify my mailing address, I said, and check on any forwarding changes. She smiled, typed, then her brow creased. It was updated in May, she said, to a different city. I leaned forward. Who requested that? She hesitated, looked at the screen again. It says, Power of Attorney. Names, Jenna McIntyre? She glanced up, cautious now. I stared at her, not moving. I never signed over power of attorney. Would you like to see the documents? I nodded. She brought out a manila folder, paper clipped and official. I flipped through it page by page. My name was on the forms, my social, my signature, but I hadn't signed a single goddamn one. One line in particular stood out, the slant of the M in Michael, curved like a child trying too hard to mimic an adult's penmanship. I'd seen it before. 2 years ago. Dinner table. Sophie had her college paperwork spread out, FAFSA forms, housing deposits, financial aid consents. Jenna had slipped a few sheets in front of me. Just routine, she'd said. Insurance updates. Sophie had laughed at something on her phone. I'd signed without looking. The clerk watched me with a kind of professional discomfort, the kind you wear when you know you're watching a man find out the floor beneath him isn't real. Would you like to contest the documents? She asked quietly. I shook my head. Not yet. Instead, I asked for a printout. Every transaction for the last 2 years. Every transfer. Every deposit. I left with a folder an inch thick and the feeling that the world I'd built had termites. When I got home, Jenna was on a Zoom call. I could hear her through the door, coaching someone. Don't lead with control. Lead with clarity. Clients respond to clean lines. Her voice like velvet over a razor. I went to the garage, sat at my workbench, and spread the papers out. Marked every date with a red pen. Transfers from my retirement to an account I didn't know existed. Disbursements labeled education costs, but going to a checking account under Jenna's name. Credit cards opened with my SSN and her email address. At some point, I stopped feeling anything. No rage. No betrayal. Just a numb kind of silence. Like a man watching his house burn down from across the street, too tired to scream. I found one folder I didn't recognize. Purple, unlabeled. Inside was a spreadsheet of expenses. Not mine. Sophie's. Wedding venue deposit, $8,500. Custom dress fitting, $1,200. Non-refundable honeymoon cruise, $6,900. Florist retainer, $2,000. All charged to my Amex. No one had asked me. The folder snapped shut in my hands. That weekend, I went with Jenna and Sophie to the supermarket. It wasn't planned. Jenna had asked if I wanted to come, rare, and I'd said yes just to feel something. Sophie was getting almond flour and pre-sliced fruit. Jenna was glued to her phone. I carried the basket. Halfway through the cereal aisle, Sophie turned, face blank, eyes hard. You don't get to tell me anything, she said. I hadn't spoken. I hadn't even looked at her. Jenna didn't miss a beat. Obviously, she said, like they'd practiced it, like I wasn't there at all. Something in me snapped, but quietly, like an old beam giving way in the walls of a house no one lived in anymore. I kept walking, basket still in hand. No one called after me. I drove home with the groceries still resting in my arms. Put them on the porch and left them there. Didn't go back out to fetch them. That was the first cut. After that, I stopped stocking the fridge. Stopped filling the gas tank on Jenna's car. Stopped paying the water bill. Let it come late, then later. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't speak of it. 3 days passed before the groceries got replaced. Jenna must have done it after I went to bed. Sophie's oat milk and probiotic smoothies were back on the shelves like nothing had changed. But things had changed. I'd made copies of every document. Uploaded them to a secure drive. Contacted a lawyer, not mine, not ours. Eleanor's. She didn't say much when I called. Just gave me a name and said, "Be thorough." That week, I saw Jenna and Sophie whispering in the living room. Sophie was holding a clipboard. There was tension behind her eyes, not fear, just calculation. Saturday, we were at the checkout line at Trader Joe's when it happened. The clerk scanned everything. $312.49. Jenna reached for her card. Declined. Tried the backup. Declined. Sophie started pulling items back off the belt. Oat milk, hair serum, imported honey. Her voice flat, clipped. Just the essentials. They left with half the cart. Didn't speak on the drive home. That night, Jenna tried to log into the joint account. She couldn't. I'd already rerouted my paychecks, frozen the cards, moved everything under a new LLC. Quiet, clean. The next day, Sophie's fiancé came by. I heard him through the window, his voice sharp, panicked. What do you mean, postponed? The invitations went out last week. I didn't hear Sophie's answer, but I saw her face afterward. Pale, drawn tight like a violin string stretched too far. She didn't make eye contact with me as she passed through the kitchen. Jenna followed her a minute later, wine glass in hand, like always. Didn't say a word. The silence had become its own language now. A language they spoke fluently. But I was learning. Every bill that came, I let sit. Every late notice, I pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. Sophie stopped smiling, stopped posting. One day, I heard her on the phone, whispering, "No, I don't know why. He just changed. I think he's trying to prove something." The thing is, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just done. Done funding my own erasure. Done giving without being asked, without being thanked, without even being seen. They were waiting for me to explode, to yell, to accuse. But I didn't. I just stepped back, let the foundation rot. And it did, bit by bit. The lawn went unmowed. The trash piled up. Sophie missed her hair trial. The florist canceled due to non-payment. The cruise line sent a final notice. I sat on the porch every evening, watching the sky turn the color of ashes, listening to the sound of a household falling apart in rooms I had once rebuilt with my own hands. I hadn't touched Jenna since the night I found that folder. Not even brushed against her arm. She hadn't noticed. Or maybe she had and decided silence was easier. One night, Sophie slammed the front door so hard a picture fell from the hallway wall. I didn't get up to fix it. She drove off in her fiancé's car, or maybe his father's, I didn't care. Tires screeching. Jenna stood at the window for a long time afterward, glass of red wine shaking in her hand, eyes vacant. She never asked me why, never confronted, never apologized, because in her mind, this was all a misunderstanding. A phase, something I'd get over. But it wasn't a phase. It was a decision. And decisions, once made, don't get undone just because someone else finally noticed what they cost. The envelope was thick, padded, no return address. Inside, a flash drive, a note with a date, and the words, "You're not crazy." No signature. I already knew who it was from. I plugged it in alone, past midnight, the house quiet except for the tick of the thermostat kicking on and the soft static of the baby monitor. Jenna still hadn't disconnected from Sophie's room. Though Sophie hadn't been a baby for almost 2 decades. The folder opened fast. No password. Inside, scans of legal documents, email chains, audio recordings, a PDF labeled disbursements _2020-2023 _final. I opened everything, read every word. There it was, plain as sunlight, Jenna's name on my accounts. Her digital signature timestamped 1 hour after our anniversary dinner in 2021. A dinner where she'd ordered the wine, toasted to years of teamwork, and handed me a stack of papers between courses. Insurance renewals, she'd said, sliding the pen across the table. I'd signed without thinking, like a man who trusts what he's already paid for. The flash drive didn't lie. Emails between Jenna and a brokerage officer showed months of strategic reallocation. Every fund I'd built was siphoned into overlapping accounts. Small enough transfers to avoid red flags. Neatly labeled, medical, education, housing. But the spreadsheet told the truth. Bridal fittings, a weekend in Tulum, a Tesla down payment under mobility grant. I closed the laptop, sat there, 15 years in that house. Every beam sanded, every gutter unclogged, every birthday paid for. All of it quiet, consistent, invisible. And they had signed me away like a contract they regretted. The next morning, Jenna kissed my cheek before leaving for the conference. Her lips didn't touch skin, just hovered, like she was afraid to press too close. "Wish me luck," she said, grabbing her laptop bag. I nodded. "Don't forget Sophie's brunch this weekend," she added. She's still upset about the dress fitting. I waited until I heard the garage door slide shut. Then I got to work. I called Eleanor's attorney, Miles D. Cohen. No small talk. You ready? He asked. I've been ready, I said. We met in a law office with walls like padded silence. I laid out everything. Originals, copies, screenshots, voice memos. I had them all. Jenna's phone had synced once to the family desktop. It had forgotten to unsync. Miles didn't blink, just nodded and said, "We'll be careful, but we won't be quiet." 3 days later, I drove to the ethics conference. Jenna was the keynote. Topic: trust, transparency, and organizational leadership. You can't make that up. The ballroom was chrome and linen. Rows of chairs, executives shifting in suits, name badges gleaming like tiny shields. Jenna stood under the lights, voice steady, posture flawless. "When trust is broken," she said, "you don't repair it with silence. You repair it with truth." I walked in halfway through, quiet, sat near the back. She saw me, just a flicker. Her smile tightened, but she didn't stop. A few rows ahead, a man stood, middle-aged, stern. Name tag read, Chair, Board of Ethics. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, not sounding sorry. "Before we go further, there are concerns that must be addressed." She turned too quickly. "That's my husband," she said into the mic with a practiced chuckle. "He's a little confused." I stood. "I'm not confused," I said. I stepped into the aisle. A technician by the projector nodded to me, "Miles guy." The screen behind Jenna flicked on. Email headers, transfers, document timestamps, line after line of financial activity all traced back to her. The ballroom went still. Jenna's voice cracked once. Then again. She tried to recover, said something about joint decisions and shared responsibilities. But the room had changed. The audience wasn't with her anymore. They were watching her unravel. I didn't say another word, didn't gloat, just turned and walked out. That night, she didn't come home. I didn't wait up. By the end of the week, her firm had suspended her. "Pending investigation," the press release said. The same phrase she'd used when Sophie skipped school senior year, and Jenna needed to manage the optics. I filed the paperwork on a Monday. No announcement. Just an envelope slid under her side of the office door. Inside, divorce papers, itemized disclosures, legal acknowledgement that the power of attorney had been forged and was now nullified. A note from Miles. Clean. Final. No mediation. She didn't contest, didn't call, didn't show up in court. Just sent a message through Sophie. "Tell him I need time." Time? I'd given her 15 years. She'd given me forged signatures and a daughter who only looked at me when she wanted money. No more. The bank accounts returned to me. The retirement funds, what was left, restored. The Amex was cleared. The brokerage unfroze the funds and issued a formal apology. But there was no celebration, no music, just a heavy kind of stillness, like the sound after a machine finally shuts off. Not silence, but absence. I moved out that week. Took only what I'd brought into the marriage. My tools, my clothes, my father's watch. Left the rest. The Le Creuset set she loved but never used. The smart fridge, the framed family photos where I was always a step out of focus. I found a one-bedroom over a tire shop on South Lamar. First floor. Cheap. No central air. But it was mine. I bought a folding table, a single chair, a coffee maker. Hung nothing on the walls. Let them stay bare. Sometimes quiet isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's a choice. Sophie called once. Didn't leave a message. Jenna emailed, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. There was nothing left to talk about. They say men mourn in stillness. That we don't wail, we rebuild. I didn't rebuild. I just stopped giving pieces of myself to people who treated my silence as permission. A week later, Eleanor came by. No appointment. Just knocked. She brought nothing. No advice. No boxes. Just stood in the doorway and said, "You look like yourself again." We sat on the porch. 2 chairs. No music. She told me about her dog dying. I told her about the time I rewired a school that should have been condemned. We laughed, but not too much. There's something sacred about quiet after betrayal. You don't fill it. You let it settle. Later that night, I opened an old drawer, found a cassette labeled Summer '97, popped it into the player. Static, then the sound of my younger voice shouting on a field, teammates cheering, a coach yelling, "That's it, McIntyre, that's it." I hadn't heard that voice in years. Not mine, the one that believed. I sat there a long time listening, didn't cry, didn't speak, just listened. Because sometimes remembering who you were is the only way to forgive who you became. The first morning in the new place, I woke before the sun. No alarm, no footsteps above me, no dishwasher humming behind a wall I paid for. Just a ceiling with a single crack running corner to corner, like a line someone once started and never finished. The coffee took longer than it should have. One of those cheap machines. Plastic smell when it heats up, water sputtering before it boils. I didn't mind. I watched the drip and listened to the pipes rattle in the walls like they were shaking off sleep. The air was heavy with quiet. Not the kind that follows a fight. Not the kind that chokes you. This quiet was earned. I sat at the folding table with a chipped mug in my hand and watched the sun rise through the dusty blinds. The street outside groaned awake. Tires on wet asphalt. Someone shouting about trash day. A truck backfiring 2 blocks over. None of it touched me. There were no texts from Jenna. No passive-aggressive calendar invites. No emails from Sophie asking if I'd consider helping with just the down payment. Just silence. And silence, it turns out, is loyal. The fridge was almost empty. Carton of eggs. 1 onion. Some leftover barbecue in foil. I didn't need more. I wasn't cooking for anyone else now. No almond flour. No imported oils. No oat milk. I hadn't realized how many items in our old fridge weren't mine. All those years of stocking shelves for other people's tastes. Paying for things I never touched. Now I opened the door and every single thing I saw was something I had chosen. Even the emptiness. I spent the next few days reclaiming what I'd let slip. Things that seemed small until they stacked high enough to bury you. I went to the DMV, updated my mailing address, opened new bank accounts, set up a mailbox in my own name, just my name. I ordered a new cassette player off eBay, paid extra for one that still clicked when you hit play. It arrived 2 days later, wrapped in newspaper from Minnesota. I peeled the tape off like it was glass. I didn't play the tape yet. Not right away. I wanted to earn it. I started walking again, not for exercise, just to feel the air. Past the auto shops and pawn stores, the little taco stand that always smelled like home. No one knew me here. I wasn't Sophie's stepdad. I wasn't Jenna's background prop. I was just a man in boots and denim, nodding at strangers who didn't care who I used to be. One night I passed a music store. Guitars in the window. A row of amps against the wall, dusty and old, but still proud. I walked in. The bell above the door sounded like 1993. "Need anything?" the kid behind the counter asked. I looked around. "No," I said. "Just remembering." That night I finally played the tape. Summer '97. The field was rough back then. No turf. Just cracked dirt and the smell of sunburnt grass. My voice came through the speakers like an echo from another life. Higher, eager, full of something I didn't recognize anymore. Hope. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, knees bent like I was still wearing cleats. It didn't make me sad. It made me honest. Because somewhere between that boy and this man, I had stopped asking for things. Not just money or love, but dignity. I had traded presents for peace. And peace bought on silence is a bad deal. I made a list. On real paper. Ink pen. Top of the page. What was mine? I wrote down things I had given freely. My time. My labor. My name. My money. My patience. My backbone. And below it, I wrote, what was taken? There weren't words for all of it. But I knew what they cost. Eleanor stopped by again a week later. No announcement. She had a bag of tools in her truck. Said her back porch light was flickering and she figured I still remembered how to fix things. I said nothing. Just grabbed my bag and followed her out. We didn't speak on the drive. Didn't need to. Her place was smaller than I remembered. Quieter, but solid. Every piece of furniture looked like it had been picked with intention. Nothing soft. Nothing for show. The porch light was simple. One of those old glass domes with a single screw holding it in place. I fixed it in 10 minutes. She brought out 2 beers. We sat on the steps, watching the moths circle the bulb. "You always knew what things were really for," she said. "You didn't decorate. You didn't waste." I nodded. She sipped, then added, "You didn't ask for enough either." I didn't respond, because what was there to say? It was a strange kind of comfort, sitting beside someone who had no stake in who you became, but still saw all of it. Not trying to rewrite history, just accepting it. I left before midnight. She didn't invite me to stay. I didn't ask. That was the balance. Neither of us owed anything. And for the first time in years, I knew what that felt like. Back in the apartment, I cleaned the tools I'd used, set them back in their case, clicked the latches shut. The sound was clean, honest. I made coffee, sat at the table, looked at the wall with the single crack, thought about sealing it. Maybe not. Sometimes it's good to remember where the fault lines are. The next morning, I went grocery shopping. No list, just walked the aisles, grabbed what I wanted. A jar of mustard, a loaf of rye, real butter, pack of tapes I didn't need. At the register, I swiped my own card, watched the total drop from my own account. No joint, no wife's name on the alert, no budget spreadsheet to explain why I'd bought 2 bags of chips. I took the receipt, folded it, pocketed it. Freedom doesn't come all at once. Comes in paper, plastic, clicks and pauses. One night, I got a voicemail from Sophie. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. Less edge, more wear. She said she was sorry. That things had gotten confused. That she missed the stability. That she didn't know how much I'd done until the lights started flickering in the house. I didn't call back. Not because I hated her, but because I'd stopped doing things just to keep other people comfortable. She'd built a life on the idea that I'd never leave. That I'd always be the man with the basket at the grocery store, the wallet in his back pocket, the quiet nod that meant yes. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not for her. Not for anyone who called me just a step. The new quiet isn't empty. It's not lonely. It's space I carved out for myself after being carved into pieces. It's the sound of a man who finally chose to stop explaining himself. It's a folding table and a cassette player and a sunrise that belongs to no one else. And every time I swipe my card at the grocery store, I remember, I'm not in the background. I'm not forgotten behind the column. I'm just done staying silent. So tell me, would you have stayed? Would you have kept paying? Would you have watched them erase your name from every line and still filled the fridge? Or would you have done what I did? Would you have finally said, enough?